Has Sasha Banks been released by WWE? We have the latest on the bosses and Naomi's WWE future and status. Plus, this Monday we saw AEW stars appearing on Monday Night Raw as part of the tribute packages to John Cena. We have the latest on how and why they appeared on Monday's WWE broadcast. Plus, speaking of Raw, we have the ratings for this week's episode. All this and more in today's WWE news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of WWE. So let's start off talking about the boss, about Naomi and their WWE future. Because even though it feels like a while ago now that big story broke when it came to Sasha Banks and Naomi walking out of WWE, their suspension, and not a lot of updates since, we have a little bit of a new update when it comes to Sasha Banks. Of course, there have been a lot of rumors and some reports regarding her possibly being released by WWE. We know that both WWE superstars' contracts were coming up at the time that they were suspended and walked out of WWE. So we're going to get into this here because there is a new update regarding Sasha Banks and Naomi. Now, Wrestling Inc.'s Raj Giri received word earlier this month that Sasha Banks was let go by WWE. Now, that story was later backed up by WrestleVotes. Now, there were other people, Sean Ross Sapp, I believe, Mike Johnson, the PW Insider, saying they couldn't confirm that, but also they couldn't outright deny it either. They were just basically met with silence when it came to that story. However, a new report by Mike Johnson of PW Insider says that both Banks and Naomi are still listed on the active roster internally. According to Johnson, neither Banks nor Naomi have been officially released by the company. Now, after the initial story came out, Fightful Select, which is Sean Ross Sapp, reported that there was backstage talk at the June 17 episode of SmackDown, which did suggest that Banks, at the very least, had been released. Fightful cited talent who, quote, would be in the position to know if the release had occurred. Johnson's report, however, seems to have officially put those rumors to bed. It must be said, though, that Raj Giri did report yesterday that Banks had been let go and basically WWE and Banks' lawyers were working to keep the deal quiet or trying to smooth things over before it was officially announced. So whilst Mike Johnson is disputing this, Raj Giri is still doubling down and saying that what he had heard. Now, as I mentioned, this all stems from Banks and Naomi walking out before the May 16 episode of Monday Night Raw when they were booked in the main event, which Naomi was actually scheduled to win. Recently, though, of course, they've been suspended ever since. Obviously, their profiles have been removed from WWEshop.com, etc., etc. They've been removed from the cold opens for the show. Recently, of course, WWE actually digitally removed Sasha Banks' name from a fan sign in the crowd. Now, Banks' contract was reportedly set to expire around 2 months following her walkout, and it was believed that Naomi was actually in the middle of renegotiating her contract with the company at the time. Now, while Banks' personal social media accounts have remained largely untouched, she has shown up in photos with a new look. Now ventures away from her on-air persona. Naomi was the first of the two to break her social media silence earlier in the month with a video of her and Jimmy Uso on the beach together. I mean, to be honest, again, we don't really know all of the details here. I wouldn't be shocked, really, at this point if Sasha Banks had been released. The reason I say that is, of course, WWE doesn't want to release Sasha Banks, particularly because she's incredibly profitable for the company. She's still very young. She's a big star, big merch seller, big ticket seller. But unfortunately, they're kind of stuck because unless they go down the route of, well, you walked out on your contract, we're going to freeze your contract for the amount of time that you're away. The issue is that if you're suspended, you're kind of implying that the contract is going to be continued. So we'll wait and see when it comes to that one. But ultimately, the reason why Sasha Banks actually might have been released is just purely because her contract was going to expire anyway. And Banks' lawyers might have gone to WWE and said, look, either she's suspended and she sees out her contract or she's released from it now. It's up to you, because even if you get to the point where it's 90 days, the 90 days might actually be longer than the time left on her contract. So it might actually be in WWE's best prerogative if they want to ensure Sasha Banks doesn't show up in an AEW. It might actually be in their best prerogative to release Sasha Banks, and then she'll actually be inactive for longer than if her contract expires. Now, of course, that would be very, very petty, but this is WWE we're talking about here, so anything is certainly possible. Now, Naomi, I mentioned, had broken her social media silence a while ago. She tweeted regarding John Cena's 20th anniversary this week. You're the best. Thank you for the encouragement and feedback you've given me throughout my years, and for the best tours ever. I'm only mad that I missed you this time. LOL. Quote, there's always this amazing energy shift whenever you're in the building. Some could say that's a bit of a sideswipe at WWE. Is it really? I don't know. But that's the latest when it comes to Sasha Banks and Naomi's status with WWE. Now, of course, Monday on Raw, we saw some familiar faces that haven't been on WWE television in a while, certainly. That being Daniel Bryan, WWE version of Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, and The Big Show, AEW's Paul White. All three AEW stars appearing on WWE programming. So obviously all three people appeared in these tribute packages to John Cena throughout the show. The show was largely centered around John Cena's 20th anniversary, and three major opponents of John Cena throughout his career have been Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, and Paul White. And it was quite surprising to see them appear in these tribute packages alongside other names such as Trish Stratus, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin, JBL, Stephanie McMahon, etc. Of course, Vince McMahon actually came out to introduce John Cena in the show, but it certainly was surprising to see these names show up in WWE, or certainly on the broadcast. Now, how did this happen? Well, AEW President Tony Khan reportedly granted permission to WWE to interview several talent of AEW's top stars for the John Cena tribute packages that aired on Monday's WWE Raw. According to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, WWE contacted Khan to seek his permission and received the green light to conduct the interviews. Given the circumstances surrounding the videos, Khan was said to be okay with the content and provided his approval. A WWE source told Fightful that they were able to land virtually everyone that they had hoped for the Cena tribute packages. And again, to be honest, it shouldn't be surprising. I mean, look, WWE, I think, has conditioned us to feel like companies can't and won't work with each other throughout the years. AEW, of course, is willing to work with anyone. Look at the companies. They just did a pay-per-view. They just did a pay-per-view with another company. They've got working relationships with New Japan, with Impact Wrestling. They've used people from the NWA. They own Ring of Honor. The list goes on. Is this a beginning of a working relationship between WWE and AEW? No. But in reality, whilst it does feel like a somewhat groundbreaking moment, because it's one thing for Chris Jericho to appear on the Broken Skull Sessions on Peacock, it's another for an active or several active AEW stars to appear on WWE television on Monday Night Raw on a flagship broadcast. That's a big deal. But in reality, if AEW blocked these stars from doing the tribute packages, that would be really petty. And it just... Who cares? Who cares? I'm sick of this tribalistic stuff, and I'm going to talk about this in today's AEW video, but I'm so sick of this tribalistic stuff of, I'm this team or I'm that team. You don't have to have a team. You can enjoy matches, you can enjoy segments, you can enjoy shows, and you can not enjoy shows and not enjoy segments, and that's fine as well. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So it was great, and look, we're talking about one of the greatest and biggest stars ever. Maybe the person with the best and longest run on top in WWE history in John Cena. So if anyone deserves, these accolades, it's him. So it was great to see these guys appear on the show, and great that everyone could work things out all around. Speaking of Cena, of course, he returned on this week's edition of Raw. We have an update when it comes to the ratings of this week's edition. Now, while not all of last week's big audience, of course, last week's audience was actually very big for Monday Night Raw amid all of the scandals going on in WWE at the moment, but not all of last week's big audience actually tuned in to see the wrestling legend return, but Raw did see strong numbers once again. WrestleNomics released the numbers for the June 27 episode of Monday Night Raw, and the program received an average viewership of 1.951 million viewers, which is nearly 2 million viewers, which gave it a 2% drop in viewership. It's essentially flat. I mean, when you're talking about single digits, it's essentially flat. The key demographic accounted a similar drop from the previous week, with an average viewing audience of 700,000, a 0.45 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. But again, still very, very good. Nonetheless, the numbers are still on the higher end, as last week's program had its highest viewership number since the weeks after WrestleMania 38 in April. Raw still ranked number one in the 18 to 49 demographic for cable originals, and number one overall for that demographic in broadcast prime time. And again, it must be said, they're good numbers. I think WWE will be very, very happy with that, and they should, because Raw last year had kind of settled back into being or actually slumped really into being a 1.7, some at times 1.6 million viewer broadcast, and that certainly wasn't ideal. So getting back in recent weeks to nearly 2 million viewers, which is really nearly SmackDown level, and SmackDown's on network television as well, is good numbers for WWE. They'll be very happy, and I think, to be fair, it reflects what is the better show. Despite the fact that Raw is a 3-hour broadcast and the time filling on that show is insufferable at times, and watching it live, the pacing of it is very, very difficult. If you compare the rosters and compare the storylines, Raw is far more compelling than SmackDown. SmackDown only had really Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar that could really, have interest on that show, and they're both very much part-time, and they don't appear every single week. That's a problem. And whenever the draft does come this year, hopefully they fix that, because that is an issue for WWE, certainly. But there you go, guys. Here's your WWE news for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Wrestling News 365, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.